Amanda Rose, and today I am pleased to welcome a very special guest. He's a former MMA professional fighter and a current MMA expert for FantasyLabs. Billy Ward is here to tell me all about how he used our very own FantasyLabs lineup optimizer to earn himself a seat in the DraftKings MMA Championship Series.
Yeah, how's it going? I appreciate the introduction. It's a little bit overstated, but I like it.
All righty. So Billy, your MMA resume is quite impressive, and that's before we even get into DFS. So tell me a little bit about your experience as a professional MMA fighter.
Yeah, I did martial arts growing up as a kid, as probably many of us did. And right towards the end of my high school career was when MMA was getting really big. So I found a gym close to my house and started training and eventually was good enough to go professional. So didn't have a great career or anything, but fought some big names and got to know a lot of people, which was a lot of fun.
That's awesome. So when did you start getting into DFS?
I randomly came across one of Labs co-founder Jonathan Bale's books. I want to say 2016 or 17. And I'd always liked fantasy football. So it just seemed like the logical extension. And it's a lot more fun getting to do it every single week instead of just once. So I was reading one of the articles that actually Brian Mears wrote it. And he had a little throwaway line, something was going to be an off-season project. And I was able to reverse engineer his email address and email him like, hey, I could just do this now. And that kind of got me started writing.
So Billy, tell me a little bit about the DFS contest and your strategy going into building a lineup that helped you qualify for DraftKings MMA contest.
Yeah, MMA DFS, it's kind of like NFL showdown slates for anyone who plays those, where the biggest thing is just trying to come up with a unique lineup. So my biggest strategy, I wanted to be overweight on the underdog in the main event, just because that's usually a positive expected value proposition most of the time. And then there was two fighters on the undercard that I picked out that I thought had really good chances of putting up a lot of points. So I wanted to isolate those and then kind of let the optimizer do the rest.
So Billy, tell me a little bit more about how you establish those three fighters and the fights that you want in your roster.
Yeah, so the first one, and it's came up over and over the last few weeks, that the underdog in the 5-round fight is just always a solid value. For people who've been watching recently, both underdog title fights won 2 weeks ago. And there's, I think, like 3 out of the last 4 the underdogs won. And the ownership on them is just way lower than it should be. So that one was pretty easy. And then the other two, there was Jamal Hill, who's actually a fellow Michigan MMA fighter. And I knew him and I knew his coach pretty well. And he was a huge underdog, like near the minimum salary. But he has really good power and really good striking ability, which is a better way to rack up points. Like the slower fights, they can win, but not necessarily make it to the best lineups. And then the final one was Jeremiah Wells, whose fight ended up being canceled. But I was actually booked to fight him one time. So I've watched like pretty much every one of his fights I've watched, over and over again. So I knew a lot about him. And I thought he was a really live underdog too. The biggest thing I would say is you have to be willing to just accept that you're not going to win every week or every time. Because there's a bunch of fighters that I eliminated from the pool right off the bat. And if one of those had a big day, like I just wasn't going to win. That happened the last event. I got rid of a guy. He was the first fight of the night. I didn't think he had much of a shot. He ends up winning by a big knockout. And my night was done first fight. So you just have to accept that, especially with tournaments, you're not going to win every time and just be willing to take that stand. Because if you don't accept that, you're not going to win any of the times. So.
And Billy, which of the FantasyLabs tools has been the most valuable to you with MMA DFS?
The biggest thing is definitely having the optimizer that will put some fighters in there that I wouldn't normally have arrived at. I'll eliminate some guys, but there's other ones that if I'm building by hand, they just wouldn't find their way in. Our optimizer does a really good job of mixing it up. So I talked about it a little bit. You can set the bounce or the range of outcomes in our optimizer, and that gives you just a much broader range of constructions than I would have came to on my own.
Thank you so much for watching. I'm Amanda Rose. He's Billy Ward, and you can get all of his articles over on actionnetwork.com. We'll see you later.